Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be considering the 6.5 Creedmoor. I've talked about in the past. We're going to be looking at it from the perspective of, is this something that you should get into, right? Should you have a gun that shoots 6.5 Creedmoor? Now, the obvious answer is yes, of course you should. You should have as many guns as possible and as many different calibers as possible. But I want to come from the approach this from the perspective that most people have limited funds, and also limited time, right? Because having a whole bunch of guns that sit in the safe not very useful to you or the guns. Okay, so you know um, every day. I mean, I shoot every day, but it's a question of which guns am I going to shoot? Okay, which ammunition would I rather be restocking? So assuming that there's some limitations that you have to kind of adhere to, whether it's financial or time, and everybody's limited by time, regardless of money, everybody's limited by time. Okay, um, so I was considering the 6.5 Creedmoor. I did some research on it. I've shot it. Okay, not I don't have a 6.5 Creedmoor gun, but I've shot other people's guns. Uh, it's kind of like what the 6.5 Creedmoor tries to do is sort of give you a recoil closer to a 5.56, but power that's closer to a 308. Okay, so that's kind of what it's trying to do. Um, and it kind of lands in the middle there somewhere. So the recoil is more than a 5.56. Now, as far as power, okay, if you're looking at it from energy, right? Because there's basically two different ways that we kind of measure the power of ammunition: energy and momentum. Energy being the more common way of looking at power. So out of the muzzle, the 308 has more energy. Okay, now that the 308 has more energy out to about some 700-ish yards. Okay, because the 308 is a fatter bullet, as it goes out to about 700 yards, the wind drag, right, the wind resistance slows it down. So after about 700 yards, the 6.5 Creedmoor tends to have more energy. Okay, not by a whole lot, but it has a little bit more energy. Okay, now that's if you're looking at it from the energy perspective. If you're looking at it from a momentum calculation, and both of these are calculated numbers that look at the mass of the bullet and the velocity. The difference is with velocity, we're giving more importance to the speed, okay, which tends to be like more of a whipping action, right? How much of a it has like a whip, like, because the whip is very light. You can break skin with a whip, but you usually can't break bones with a whip. Okay, so it doesn't have that ability to like really push through and penetrate, right? Versus a baseball bat, right? A baseball bat's going really slow. With a baseball bat, you can hit something, right? You may not break skin, but you can break bones underneath. Okay, so I like looking at momentum, even though it's like not as common. So when we look at the momentum calculation, the 308 continues to have more momentum versus a 6.5 Creedmoor all the way out to 1,000 yards. Okay, so and both of these are calculated numbers. Now, again, these are calculated numbers. What about actual effects? Because you might say, okay, forget what the calculator geeks are doing with these things. What's the actual effect? So I was watching a video from this guy, I forgot which channel it is, that does lots of hunting and has hunted large game with both 308 and 6.5 Creedmoor. And what he said is that both of these cartridges are basically have a similar effect out to about 600 yards. Okay, and then past 600 yards, like once you get into the 700 yards, they both start to struggle. Meaning, not that they can't kill the animal, but what he has noticed is like at 700 yards plus, the animal, let's say, will die slower, or it takes more bullets to kill it. So it starts having diminishing. Both of these cartridges start having diminishing returns past 700 yards on large game. Okay, so from the perspective of this hunter that I was watching, that basically does lots of hunting with both of these cartridge, they both struggle at or past 700 yards. Now, as far as bullet drop, one of the benefits of the 6.5 Creedmoor is because the bullet is going a little bit faster, it has less drop. So I was watching another video of a different guy that also shoots both of these cartridges, and I'm referring to other people's experience because I'm a 308 guy. I have shot 6.5 Creedmoor, but I don't have a whole lot of experience with 6.5 Creedmoor. So this guy made an excellent point. He's like, you know what? If I'm shooting, let's say 800 yards, what's the difference if I dial up, 10 mils or if I dial up only 8 mils? Okay, so he's like, what's the difference? It makes no difference to me. I'm dialing up either way. It's a question of whether I'm going to go up 10 or am I going to go up 10 or am I going to go up 8 or some other number? Or for wind hold, there's a question of like, is he going to hold an extra half mil, and especially with trying to hold for wind. The wind is so inconsistent that most of the time you just gotta look for splashes, okay, and correct based on that. So that's some really interesting information that I thought you guys should have. Now, from my perspective, right, as a because my primary interest in these type of guns is shtf, Mad Max, Apocalypse. To me, the 308 is anti-material. Okay, I'm a big believer in 5.56. I want to get as much as I possibly can out of the 5.56, which is cheaper. I have more rounds of right. I can have a much bigger stockpile of 5.56. I want to basically squeeze as much as possible out of my 5.56 before moving up to some other caliber that I have less rounds of, okay, and less guns of, right? Because with AR-15s, if they get lost, broken, abandoned, traded, whatever, stolen, I've got a lot more AR-15s versus guns in whether it be 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor. I've got less of these guns. Okay, so a gun like a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor, well, in my case 308, is specifically anti-material. Okay, particularly for punching through barriers. Okay, that's why I look at the momentum number in addition to the energy number. Particularly with anti-vehicle defense. Again, think of Mad Max Road Warrior. A convoy of trucks trying to run you down. That's the function that I have for the 308 AR-10. Okay, from zero distance out to, and remember, in a SHT, if you're using it for anti-vehicle, that's the 308 is going to be a better choice. Even let's say at 200 yards, if you've got a vehicle coming at you, right, that's going to be a better choice. So it's not purely for distance shooting. Even at close distance, that's going to have an advantage. Now, as far as 6.5 Creedmoor versus 308, under 700 yards, the 308 has an advantage, right? Again, we got to be comparing similar ammunition, right? When we're looking at 6.5 Creedmoor 308, you got to be looking at ammunition of the same grade, right? You can't compare like target loads to like high power, some high power load or something. You gotta be of the same grade. So when you're looking at the same grade, the 308 has both an energy and momentum advantage below 700 yards, definitely under 500 yards. So again, that's why I go to 308. But aside from that, there's another reason why I say go 308. Okay. The 6.5 Creedmoor, from what I've been able to gather, is what people will call a barrel burner. Okay, because the 6.5 Creedmoor is a higher pressure round going at a higher velocity, it will eat through your barrel faster. Okay, and especially on a it's one thing if I'm burning out AR-15s, right, that have that I have lots of. It's another thing if I'm burning out 308s that I don't have a lot of. So that's a consideration, okay? So how much faster does it burn out? So if you listen to competition shooters, right, they will tell you that the 6.5 Creedmoor is good for about 2,000-ish rounds, which to me is like shit, man. I do that like in a couple of months, and they do it as well. They may do it as well, but to them it's part of their expense that they just changing barrels, right? So competition shooters will tell you that the 6.5 Creedmoor is about a 2,000 round barrel, okay, and they'll tell you that the 308 is about an 8,000 round barrel. Now, with these competition shooters, I mean, to them, a barrel is burnt if the group opens up by like a 1/4 inch, okay? So if it goes from shooting like a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch at 100 yards, I mean, that's a burnt barrel to them, okay? So that obviously is not the case with me, right? That's not the case with most people that would want a gun like this for survival, or shtf, or that type of function, okay? So I'm okay with groupings that are all the way up to 2 inches, okay? 2 MOA guns are just fine with me, okay? But you want to start small so that you have a little bit, you have a lot more margin as you run up the round counts, because if you start with a 1 MOA gun, yeah, for me, this shoots about 1.25 inches. It's probably good for about 22,000 to 25,000 rounds. Okay, by the time it gets to 25,000 rounds, and obviously when it gets to 25,000 rounds, the groups are going to start keeling. But on the way up there, the groups are going to start opening up. They're going to start moving towards that 2 MOA, 2.5 MOA, pushing towards 3 MOA. And that's fine because that will still get me out to 500 yards. Okay, so for me, like for a competition shooter, they look at a 6.5 Creedmoor and they say 2,000 round barrel versus 308, 8,000 round barrel. For most people, you can look at these two guns and you can say 6.5 Creedmoor, 8,000 round barrel, 308, let's say 25,000 round barrel. Okay, so that's a that's a way that we can look at it. So for me, that's significant. Okay, that's significant, especially on a 308 gun, where it's not as common as an AR-15. It's not as standardized. I mean, it's not as this is not as easily replaced. First of all, it's a more expensive gun. Okay, now I got this. This is a Palmetto, great bargain. I've done many videos on this. I'll put a playlist below in the comments. The lower was $200. And then the upper was $500, so I'm $700 into this AR-10 over here, and then I got a $500 scope on top of this. That's the primary arms 5 to 25 by 56. But as far as the gun itself, I got a $700 gun there. So the upper by itself, like I said, was $500 versus typical AR-15 uppers that are like $300 from Palmetto. Okay, so I mean overall we got a $700 gun versus a $500 AR-15. So because because these guns are more expensive, harder to, and they're not standardized, so it's hard to come by parts. That's a concern, right? That's a concern. If the 6.5 Creedmoor is running through the barrel faster, that would be a reason why I may want to stick with a 308. I mean that's just something that was a consideration for me. Maybe one for you. Now, the 6.5, because on this Palmetto AR-10, right? This is a PA-10 Gen 3. I can get a 6.5 Creedmoor upper and put on this AR-10 lower. Okay, so within the same manufacturer, you might be able to do that. You can do it with Palmetto. I don't know if you can do it with other manufacturers. Again, this stuff is AR-10s, 6.5 Creedmoor guns. They're not. There's no mil spec. They're not standardized. So you pretty much, with very few exceptions, you have to go back to the manufacturer to get parts. Right now, some of the stuff like the trigger group in this it has a mil spec trigger group. But again, there's no guarantee. If you buy it from a different manufacturer, they might have an entirely proprietary trigger group. Okay, so these are things that you want to be considering. So after weighing all the things that I mentioned, right? In my opinion, it's like it doesn't make sense for me to go with a 6.5. Now, 6.5 Creedmoor makes a lot of sense if you're shooting past 1,000 yards regularly. Okay, when I did the calculation, the 308 had a momentum of 32. The 6.5 Creedmoor had a momentum of 31. Okay, so they're getting really close. I'm pretty sure by 1,200 yards, the Creedmoor is probably going to surpass the 308 in terms of momentum. And at that distance out there, like 1,200 yards, the 308 is going to really start dropping. So that's where it's like you may, because I said earlier that like it's 800 yards. What's the difference if you dial up 8 mils or you dial up 10 mils, right? But if you're out at like 1,200 yards, you may run out of elevation in your turn. You may not be able to dial any higher if you're shooting 308 versus 6.5 Creedmoor. Okay, so the 6.5 Creedmoor may give you that option. So if I was like, for me, it's a struggle to get out to 1,000-yard range. Right? I gotta drive some I can shoot 200 yards every day. I can shoot 500 yards, several times a month. Okay, but to get to like 800 yards to 1,000 yards, I gotta do like 4 hours of driving. So, and I don't have a place where I can shoot like 1,200 yards. So for me, it's like, yeah, definitely AR-10 308. That's what's the most practical for me. Now, as far as the price of the ammunition, the last time I checked, they're about the same. So it's not, I was actually surprised. I expect the 6.5 Creedmoor to be more expensive just because it was a novelty thing. But other consideration is, even if they're like about similarly priced, during like times of like shortage, political turmoil, BS, you might have a harder time finding the 6.5 Creedmoor versus the 308, which is a much more common cartridge that's been around for way longer. Okay, so some things for you guys to consider. I'm not saying this one is better than that one or whatever. I'm just giving you some information, and I did keep it somewhat broad. I didn't get too crazy with the numbers. I've talked about this in the past where I got a little bit more into the details with the numbers and energy and stuff like that. But I wanted to keep it a little bit more broad and easier to digest. But these are the things that I considered, and why I think that the AR-10 shooting the 308 makes more sense to me. Now, 308 versus 7.62 by 5.1. If your barrel shoots 308, it will also shoot 7.62 by 5.1 NATO. Okay, if your barrel says 7.62 by 5.1 NATO, you technically you're not supposed to put 308 in there. Okay, although I don't think there's from what I've not been able to record a single documented case of anybody's barrel actually blowing up because they shot a 308 in a 7.62 by 5.1. Okay, and likewise, I've never heard of anybody's barrel actually blowing up because they put a 5.56 in a 223 barrel. Okay, I've never heard of any. I've heard of them blowing up for other reasons, right? Like squib loads, or trying to send a 300 blackout down a 5.56 barrel. But I've never heard of anything like that. Like of anybody. But anyway, the manufacturer will tell you that, hey, if it's a 308 barrel, you can shoot either 7.62 or 308. But if it's a 7.62 barrel, you can only shoot 7.62. So something for you guys to also know. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Drop some comments below and look for the AR-10 playlist below in the comments.